Welcome to the Knit My Heart, Sticka mitt hjärta podcast. This is episode 2, and my name is Maivor, and I come to you from outside of Vasa in western Finland. Just want to start by saying a big thank you to everyone who watched my first episode and who have subscribed and given me the thumbs up or commented. I really appreciate that, and thank you for coming back if you are a returning viewer. And if you're new, welcome to my knitting corner of the universe. Today is the 9th of February, which is pretty much midwinter in my part of the world. We haven't had much of a winter though. We have a little bit of snow right now, and we've had some nice wintry days this week actually, but we now have southerly winds again and plus temperatures, so the snow will probably melt. So it's not been much of a winter. But the light is returning, which means that I can actually film in the afternoon, which is great. Today I want to talk to you, of course, about everything that I'm knitting on and that I have finished. I want to tell you a little bit about the Neula Vasa event and some purchases that I made there last weekend. And I also thought that I would share a little bit about myself as a knitter, my knitting history. Now I decided that I would put that segment right at the end of the podcast because it's a little bit chatty and you might not want to wait through that to get to all the knitting, although it is 100% knitting related, and I will also be showing some pieces from the past. But I'll talk to you about that right at the end. So let's just jump into things that are off the needles. Now the first thing is, of course, this cardigan that I'm wearing. This is the Weirwood cardigan. It's by, let's just check, designed by Sarah Alderson. Sarah Alderson. Weirwood apparently means something to fans of Game of Thrones. I haven't watched that. I haven't watched a single episode. I'm one of those rare people. So it doesn't mean anything to me, but apparently it has some significance in that series. It's a top-down knit in the round, and I have staked it. Let's just see. That's the yoke. And it is quite a long cardigan, so goes well over my hips. And then it just has these garter finishings around the hem and the button band. Now this is knit in Novita Nalle, which is not a yarn that I would generally choose for garments or sweaters. It's a staple yarn that I think probably every knitter in Finland has used or has in their stash or has had at some point. It's a wool nylon blend. I think it might be a sport weight, a little thicker yarn. It's a very sturdy, very durable yarn, good for really sturdy boot socks, for instance. But it's not a yarn that makes my heart sing, if you know what I mean. So why have I knit a whole cardigan in this yarn? And also, I said in my last episode that I don't really wear beiges and grays and neutral colors like that because they wash me out. So now here we are. I'm wearing gray. Now this is a yarn with a history, and I feel I want to share it with you. It's a bit long. It's a bit of a long story, but I still want to share it with you. This yarn used to be another sweater that I knit for my husband more than 20 years ago, when we were quite recently married. We are talking about the late 90s. I will put a picture up here of this garment before I ripped it. And as you can see, it was it was quite a laborious knit at that time. It was full of cables. It has this honeycomb pattern, and it was knit at quite a small gauge. It was a lot of work, and it was also a lot of yarn. A really great amount of yarn that went into this project. And he did wear it on and off, but he did complain that this polo neck was a bit tight and that it was itchy against his skin, which I can totally appreciate. And also, men tend to grow around the waist, maybe just a little bit, but we can say that that's because he's a firefighter and he has just grown muscle. So it didn't fit too well and anymore, shall we say. So I asked him, do you like this? Do you love it? Do you still want to wear it? And he said, well, yeah, he likes it, but it's a bit tight. So I thought, okay, we don't want that to just be lying in the wardrobe. There's plenty of yarn in there that can be recycled, reused. So I ripped it, all of it. I didn't actually weigh the yarn, so I don't know how much yarn there was, but there were many hundreds of grams in it. So all of a sudden I had this huge amount of nalle yarn. And as I said, I'm not a great lover of the nalle yarn as such, not even for socks, because I find it's just a little bit too thick for my liking. So I thought I would try my hand at dyeing. I did my first experiments with food coloring, and that turned out okay. And then I thought, well, I'd really like to try plant dyeing. And this was in the fall, in the autumn last year, maybe October or so. And in October, there is nothing you can forage outside for dyeing. There are no fresh leaves or flowers, or everything is pretty much dead. But I did some research, borrowed some books, and found that you can use all sorts of things. And so I ended up doing a lot of experiments with dyeing, and they are, the leaves here, they are from those yarns from those experiments. Let me just show you a bit closer. You can perhaps see that there are 3 different shades here. They're quite close, but anyway. The green is not a hand-dyed yarn, but the other colors here are. And if I remember correctly now, what I've used here is carrot leaves, sort of the green stuff from the carrots, birch twigs. Now they were twigs that I had picked in the spring, and I had planned to use them for a gardening project, and they had just been left over. And I just chopped those up and put them in the pot, and they produced a green, yellowy color. And then the final one here is turmeric, both fresh and powdered turmeric. That turned out quite bright. That was nice. And they are all dyed on this gray base. This is sort of the original yarn color. So there suddenly I had several colors to use out of this frogged sweater. And so I decided to knit this pattern. And I just finished it last night. I sewed in the buttons last night while I was watching the Swedish Melodifestivalen. And so now it is officially finished. It like all my sweater projects, I reknit stuff. I don't know. I redid the yoke once. I redid the hem. That's just the story of my sweater life. But I'm quite pleased with how it turned out. It's one of these lounge about at home sweaters, I think. It's warm, it's comfy, and I think it could even be worn as a bit of a coat for outdoor use. Of course, it's not buttoned all the way, it's only buttoned up here. And I think probably I may be wearing it open most of the time if you just pull it on when you're feeling a bit cold. But yeah, really happy with how that turned out, considering this is yarn that I got for nothing. And I also have to say a big sort of plus for the Nalle yarn is its performance, because I mean this is yarn that has been in another project for 20 years and it still looks perfectly smooth and really, really fresh and new. So this project makes me happy in the sense that I made do. This is a motto I have: make do. Make do with the things that you have. If you don't have to buy new stuff, of course, sometimes you just want to buy stuff, and that's okay too. But if you have stuff lying around, and if you can transform it into something else, then you make do with what you have, and that triggers me. I really enjoy living my life that way. So this is a make do project, and it is finished. Yay! I finished the sweater. Hooray me! Okay, that was the long story about the sweater and the yarn. Did I forget anything? The buttons, I bought those at Neulovasa. They are birch, I think. So they are made from wood, handmade out of birch wood. I'll tell you just a little bit about the seller when I get to that, to the Neulovasa segment. Okay, what else? Socks. These were on my needles the last time, and I finished them. They are my Totisesti Edullinen socks. By the designer is Anna Mäkilä, and the pattern is in her book Katse kantapäihin. A fun, quick knit using my Advent swap yarns. Colorful. Like most of my scrap yarns, they are either colorful or dark, so this is a good combination of those. And I made some sock blockers, yay! That is another make do project. I said last time that I don't have any sock blockers, but then I watched an episode of Happy Knitting, the Happy Knitting podcast by Julia in Germany. And she had made her own sock blockers from old placemats. Plastic placemats that you keep on the table. And we use these quite a lot because we have a table with a glass top. So we use placemats all the time, and these were about to be replaced anyway. And I thought, well, that's brilliant. I can make all my old placemats into sock blockers and mitten blockers and what have you. So I just made some sock blockers. And these work fine. They're a little bit flimsy. They're not sturdy like wooden ones, but they do the job perfectly. There is even a template that you can download. Oh, now I forget the name of the site. I will put it up here. But it's a template. They have different sizes, and you can customize them to the length of your foot and so on. Perfect. Really, really easy. Another successful recycle project. So those are finished. And these were my first sukkalaatikko and box of socks challenge socks of the year 2020. My second socks in that same challenge are also a leftover project, scrap yarns or leftover yarns. These are sock. The pattern is called sock number 21. The designer is Kerstin Balke. I think that's how she's pronounced. She's German, and the pattern is in a book, which I now forgot to take with me. Please just excuse me 1 second and I'll get it. Okay, back with the book. I got this out of the library, so it's not my own book. This is the Finnish translation of Kerstin Balke's book. It's called Villasukkien uudet trendit. And all of the socks in this book are color work and very easy 4-stitch repeat patterns, I think every single one of them. But she has combined them in different ways, and it's amazing the variety you can achieve when you combine just 4-stitch patterns into color work. So this is actually quite inspiring. I think she has lots of nice patterns in this book. Now these, I call these my 70s socks because the colors definitely remind me of the 70s. And as you can see, they're not identical. I have used at least 3 different yellows. So here's a very light yellow, and these are brighter. And some of the yarn, some of this orange peach yarn is also self-striping, which means that some of the stripes are different, it's recolored in some places, but I think that's kind of fun. They're scrap yarn socks and scrap yarn socks, and they're unique. So, of course, they were really a quick knit. When you're knitting color work that is this easy, you just want to go on and on. You don't ever want to stop. So I knit this really quickly. The challenge with color work of this kind is, of course, that you will get a join because you change colors a lot, and when you're doing that, you always have to be very careful about the tension and trying to disguise this jog here as much as possible. So it's not invisible, but it's not too bad, I think. And you get better at it as you progress. I find also at learning to keep the tension right. So these were just a fun project that just flew off the needles. And yeah, I can recommend Caston's book if you want to do simple color work and just find new inspiration for how you can use colors in different ways. And I think that's all I have finished, actually. Well, on the needles, pretty much the same stuff as last time. The raspberry sweater, the sea blush sweater that is, has progressed. I have finished the body, not once, but twice. I have reknit the body. Always do that. Always have to do that. When I had actually come right down to the bottom and I tried it on, and it really felt really baggy. But not baggy enough to be really oversized. It was just, making these sausages around the torso, and I didn't like that. So I ripped it up all the way up until, this is a bit difficult to see, all the way up to the yoke. And then I really cinched it really hard, because this yoke is in a sort of ribbed pattern. It has a lot of stitches that are pulled together by the yoke, but when you come to the stockinette section, it just kind of expands. So there were suddenly a lot of stitches and a lot of ease at this point. So what I did is that as you can see, I decreased quite heavily, both at the sides and at the bust. So I have some bust decreases right here. You can't see that now, but and then I increased also for the waist, because I have a really short upper body. So in order for things not to land too heavily on my hips, I need to increase for the hips quite heavily as well. Yes, but now I have actually, before starting the sleeve, I actually blocked the finished body just to see if it's good, if it fits well. And now it has negative ease, so it's really quite fitted. But that's okay. I like it that way. I think this particular sweater will do well with that kind of shaping. So now I've started with the sleeves, and hopefully this will be finished fairly soon. It's still a fun knit. I'm still loving it. It's just a story of my life, as I said. Reknitting, reshaping, redoing things. And this was knit, or is knit, in Holst yarn, super soft, and Holst Titicaca, one thread of each. And then we have also, from same as last time, the Silva mitten. Oh, the Silva mitten. Now I have finished one, even the thumb. So that's okay. And now I only have, needles falling all over the place. I have one thumb left, and I am procrastinating about this one thumb. Because what I did, I modified this. I made this thumb gusset a little deeper, or I increased a little bit more. I made it go a little higher up than it was in the pattern, because it would have been too low for me otherwise. And of course that means that I have more live stitches here than the pattern calls for, which means I have to modify the color work. And I've already done it once, so I can do it again, but I'm just procrastinating about it because it needle down, because it requires me to think, or it requires me to look at this other one and follow closely what I've done here. So pretty. I would like to finish them before winter is over, and I will. Just have to muster up some motivation to get that done. Now these two yarns, which are Drops alpaca silk and Novita florica, so one is an alpaca silk and the other is a 100% wool yarn. They were definitely not made for each other. One is very slippery, has no grab at all, and the other one has more of a grab, but has nothing to grab onto. So this is a really uneven. It's really uneven around the edges, and I'm hoping maybe I could even block the first one just to see if it turns out okay in the end. This is also a make-do project. I used what I had, leftover yarn, deep stash yarn that had been lying there for a long time. So hopefully they will turn out all right in the end. That's all I'm gonna say about those. Now I do have some new stuff as well. Oh, sorry. The February sock in Kia's Bod Free Socks 2020 Challenge. This is Woodland Walk. Oh, let's see now. Do I remember her name? This Handmade Life is her Instagram account and her Ravelry name as well, I think. A really, really fun knit, quick knit. It's really addictive to just see these leaves evolving, just one knit, another one, and all of a sudden you're finished. I cast these on the 1st of February, as this is the February sock pattern, at the Neulovasa event. And the yarn that I'm using, oh, did I bring the ball band? I did not. Anyway, it's Sweet Georgia Tough Love Sock yarn. It's a merino nylon blend. And it has this just very, very slight variegation. I don't know if it's very, very slight. It shows better in some lights than in others, but it's not completely solid. So, which is nice. And it's a dream to knit with. Such a nice yarn. It's soft and it produces such a nice fabric and really, really nice. I have also started the second sock, but I've only just started on the cuff. The yarn, I bought this on at the Tampere Crafts Fair in November last year. On an impulse, really, because when I went to the crafts fair, I had sort of in my mind planned to buy mostly or only yarn from Finnish indie dyers or from Finnish companies, because there were lots of new yarns out that I hadn't tried, and I wanted to support local entrepreneurs. So that was my plan, and then I stumbled across this yarn. It was sold by a Finnish yarn shop, but Sweet Georgia is a Canadian company. But these were on sale, and they were greatly reduced in price, and they were so pretty. And I ended up buying 4 skeins. Yeah, there goes my plan for supporting Finnish. Well, I did buy Finnish yarns as well, but I fell for Sweet Georgia, and I'm not sorry, because it's a lovely yarn. I'll show you the other colors. They're all different. I'll show you them some other time, because I didn't bring them here now. And Sweet Georgia is an indie dyer as well. She started, I remember when she started, that was probably about 15 years ago or something. just like everybody else, as a single woman entrepreneur following her passion, and she has grown, or the company has grown into a well-established fiber company. So that's encouraging and inspiring as well, and a really good yarn. We'll see how it wears, but so far so good. And then I have another cast on. Oh wait, this is the Silver Lining sweater by the one and only Jennifer Steingass, Knit Love Wool, who has so many gorgeous color work patterns out there. Now I'm going to make this a cardigan. This is the steek in front, so it will be a little bit different, and it will be a nice one, I hope. Almost finished with the color work, maybe just about 10 rows or so to go, and I'm loving it. This is such a fun knit. It's beautiful, and it just flows off the needles. I'm really enjoying this. Now, in accordance with today's theme, which seems to be make do, this is also a make do yarn or project. A really deep stash yarn. This is a Finnish 100% wool. I bought this at a market directly from the producer, I think, but so long ago that I cannot for the life of me remember who I bought it from, or anything really about the yarn. All that I know is that it's Finnish, made from wool from Finnish sheep, that it's grown fairly locally, or farmed fairly locally, and that I bought it from the producer. That's all I remember. And this has been in my stash for a long time because I really did not know what to make with it. I just wanted to buy it to have it, or to support the farmer. And I bought 300 grams of it. But I think it's something about the color that hasn't really spoken to me. I mean, it's a perfectly pretty color, and I think it works quite well in this combination with the light gray that I'm using here. But there was something about it that I just couldn't. It didn't speak to me until I came up with the idea that I can make color work with it, and that I can also combine it with a thread of some other yarn. Now, this is very difficult to see, but let's see now. It won't focus now. But I'm holding two threads together. One lace weight yarn of a just slightly different brown shade, and this one, just to give it that extra bit of depth, and also because I want to use up this yarn. Yeah, it was just an idea I had, and I think it works well. And I think when I start knitting the body flat in just one color, it will add just that little bit of extra depth to the fabric, or that's what I'm hoping for. Anyway, this other yarn, which is also an old stash yarn, it's Wetterhof Sylvia, and it's a 30% silk and 70% wool yarn. I have used this in a lace shawl a long time ago, and I did have quite a bit left over. I'm hoping it will be enough. if not, I will have to order some more, which kind of goes against the make-do concept. But anyway, fortunately this Wetterhof company is one of these long since established, and they do have the same colorway in their color card still. So we'll see how far this goes. I'm also prepared to make this quite short if that's what it takes to make the yarn go all the way. This I have no idea of the meterage of this yarn. But I do know that they were 100 gram skeins, and I have knit this much, and I still have at least half of the first skein left. So I'm thinking that the meterage is quite good, and I'm hoping that will actually last throughout. Well, that will take me through the whole sweater. The gray, light gray, is Rauma Finul, which I actually bought at the Neulovasa for this project specifically. Now I'm also holding that together with a leftover yarn from a lace project a long time ago. So now that doesn't really show in these stitches here. So it's more or less. I could have left this out, but it's a way to use some of it up, and then just maybe to create the balance that I'm using two threads and two threads on both of these colors. This is Grinjasko merino silk, a lace or even a cob weight yarn that was in my stash. So, but I'm excited about this. I wanted to do some of Jennifer Steingass's. I wanted to do many of her designs, and I'm quite happy to be doing this silver lining as my first one. I think maybe I'll even cast on another one, because I have some yarn for another of her designs. But I'll need to finish at least one of my sweaters first. So this is well on its way. Happy about that. Now the Neulovasa event that took place last Saturday on February the 1st in Vasa. It was a free event. Anybody was welcome to come. They had booked the big cafeteria in the university building here in Vasa University, where people could just sit and knit, have some coffee, and just chat and socialize. And then there were at least 10 yarn vendors present in the dyers and local yarn stores, and just yum. Lots of good stuff available there, and there was a lot of people. I have no idea, but probably several hundreds of people attending. So a really great day. I did some purchases. I found some of my knitting buddies, old and new, that I was able to sit and chat with and knit with, and I had just a really good time. And I just want to show you some of the purchases, or the purchases that I made. Oh, let's start with this one. Ulrike by Anki. This is a BFL sock yarn. 75% BFL, 25% nylon. And in the dyer, I don't actually know that much about her. Hand dyed in Turku, Finland. Has a very slight gray tinge to it. It's basically a cream white with a bit of gray in it. and I bought this mainly as a neutral for color work. If I want to do a color work sock, color work metnorcal or shawl even. I have, as I said, I have a lot of dark colors in my stash. I haven't really stocked up on light colors generally, and I found that was actually missing from my stash. From my stash. So I thought this would be a good complement for that. And the BFL, I really like the feel of the BFL wool. So a little luxury to go. So that was my first yarn, and then the other one is Yarn by Stu. And this is in the colorway Gondor. Now, if you are a fan of The Lord of the Rings, of course you will know what Gondor is. If you're not, then I can tell you that this perfectly reflects Gondor. This dyer, whose name I don't know what her name is. The label is Yarn by Stu. I don't know the name of the diary herself, but she has several series of colorways reflecting movies or TV series. So she has a Game of Thrones, a Harry Potter colorway series, and a Lord of the Rings series, at least, which I think is kind of cool. So I bought this mostly for the name, because we have just recently been watching all of the Lord of the Rings movies again, and yeah, I think this is really pretty. It's a superwash, 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon sock yarn. Will probably do excellently as a shawl as well. We'll see what I do with this. I haven't decided, but it's very pretty. I pet it every now and then. And then I bought I bought the Rauma phenol, which I'm using for the silver lining color work. I bought 2 balls, but I probably will only be needing the one, so I will have one over. But I really like this yarn now that I have tried it. I hadn't tried it before because it's not very widely available here in Finland, or locally anyway, where I live, but I really like it. I think it knits up beautifully, it feels really nice, it has this rustic quality to it. Very nice, and it has the most delicious colorways. I've looked at some of the sellers in Sweden that have the full range, and it's just awesome, gorgeous. So I am thinking very hard now about what I could use some more of this Rauma phenol to what I could make of it, and where I could get some more. I may have to use my Swedish friends to get the colors that I want. Yeah, and then I just also at the Nolavas I bought some knitting paraphernalia, little things like some stitch markers, very cute. Oh, let's see now. These are from Koskemill, which is a local spinning mill. Very exciting, very industrious woman, an Australian who's immigrated to Finland and spins wool from locally produced, spins yarn from locally produced wool, and also sells a little bit of other knitting related stuff. And I also have some of her yarn. It's a really exciting endeavor, so go and check her out on Instagram if you like. I think that's about all I have on and off the needles and as far as stash acquisitions go. So shall we get into my knitting history? This could go on forever and ever, because I have a long knitting history. But I just wanted to highlight a few things that I like to look back on and that have defined me in many ways as a knitter. Now I learned to knit. My mom taught me to knit, and I think that was maybe before I started school, even. So maybe age 6 or 7 or something like that. And I remember some of the first things that I knit were probably clothes for my dolls, for my Barbie dolls. I remember I had my very best friend, who she had also learned to knit from her mom, I think, and we would knit Barbie doll clothes together. And we had learned a slightly different way of casting on. I remember it was a long tail cast on, but we held the yarn somehow a little bit differently and did the sort of looping slightly differently. And I remember we would have arguments about which was the correct way to cast on. No, you can't turn the needle that way, you have to turn it this way. So those are some of my very first knitting memories. Little did I know back then how many very different ways there are to cast on. Knitting I've knitted little things pretty much all through school, I think. We also did knitting at school. But I remember at about the age of 11, 12, that's when I started knitting sweaters. So I suddenly was really into that. I wanted to knit my own sweaters. And my mom, being a crafty person herself, thankfully, she let me. We bought yarn from the supermarket, more or less, probably 150% acrylic. But that was all I needed. I knit my heart out. Because I think even then it was more about the process than about the products. I wanted to knit, I wanted to learn, I wanted to read the pattern, I wanted to go through that process of actually making something for yourself. I don't think I have kept any of those sweaters from that time. It would be fun to actually look at them again, but they weren't any easy projects. They were. I remember there being intarsia. There were structures, sort of stitch patterns. There were all sorts of things. And back then, the patterns that were available, we are now talking about the mid-80s. There were patterns available. I think knitting was quite popular, but it wasn't this woolly fibery trend that's now. It was more, colors and frills and acrylic all the way. All of the patterns back then had to do the garments in pieces. You knit a back piece and a front piece, and you knit the sleeves separately, and then you'd seam them all together, and then you would pick up the neckline, and it was a lot more assembling than it is in many of the patterns today, when knitting has really evolved into being much about knitting everything in one piece, which I perfectly appreciate and love very much. But my history was in knitting things in pieces, and always doing the purl rows and all that. And then I think My next kind of knitting, major knitting episode came quite a bit later, in my early 20s, mid 20s, when I was recently married, I think. As I said, with this yarn, the sweater that I knit for my husband was one of those episodes periods of my life when I was really hardcore into knitting. And I actually, at that time, this is the late 90s, I actually took a class, I remember, on knitting Norwegian sweaters, because that was all the rage at that time. And by Norwegian sweaters, I mean sweaters with these loppe, flea dots over the body, and color work borders, mostly not in the round. There were not yokes that were knit in the round, but going across. And so I wanted to knit one of those for my husband. So, and there was a class organized here in our city, and I attended that. And I still have that, or he still has the sweater that I knit during that class. Oh, this is huge! It is quite a loose, lots of. But this is what I knit in that class, and as you can see, this is knit from the bottom up, and this is knit in the round, starting at the ribbing, and just it's a straight tube, straight up, and then it has sticks for the armhole. And that was kind of the new thing, the thing that we actually learned during that course. Of course, there was also the color work and how you hold the yarn, and how you perhaps construct a pattern of your own, how you do the maths to make it add up. Because at least I didn't have a pattern. I didn't have a ready-made pattern for this. I just picked all these borders out of some pattern library or something that I had seen somewhere. I don't recall anymore. I didn't have a finished pattern. I just found these and I thought, I want these on my sweater, and then I just added them. And so there are different borders on every segment here. Lots of different borders, actually. Yeah. But the sticking, that was the sort of the exciting part, and the thing that I had never done before, a completely new technique. And then I don't recall how we did the neck. Did I actually decrease here and knit back and forth, or is this also somehow sticked? That I don't remember, I have to say. This is a folded over rib here, and it's knit and sewn back here. So it's possible that I may have sticked this as well. That I don't remember, actually. But with the sleeves, what you did, of course, was that you knit all the way up to the shoulder. Then you sewed on machine sewing, I think, and then you cut it open, and then you attach the sleeve. The sleeve was knit. Oh, you can see that the floats has been caught on the back here, which has pulled these fleece together. The sleeves were knit from the cuff up, and when you reached the top, what you did was you'd knit a purl row, which and then you'd continue with some stockinette for a few centimeters after the purl row. And when you assembled this, you sewed it together, the purl row is where you attached the sleeve to your stick edge, which makes it really look really neat. And then those extra centimeters you use to cover the stick, so that was sewn to the backside here. So inside here is there's a bit of there's some extra fabric where that sort of little bit of band actually covers the stick and just makes it look really nice and tidy on the inside. So that was quite advanced, I think. But apparently that's an old technique. That's how these Norwegian sweaters have been made over the years. So traditional techniques in new materials. And looking at this now this is over 20 years old. This has held up incredibly well, I have to say. Apart from some of the floats being caught right here, I think maybe from using a watch or something, because it's only on the one sleeve. There is no pilling whatsoever. This yarn has held it together incredibly well. This wasn't one of this yarn. This is actually the same quality as the toe and the cuff and the heel on these socks. So it seems to be a yarn that was popular by me at that time, and it's called Pirta Villanalle, I think. Not one of these very grabby yarns, like for instance the Rauma Final. I think if I made this today, I would probably use one of those yarns because it's more in line with the tradition of these types of sweaters. But back then I didn't want to do that, so I used a yarn that was a bit more smooth, had a little less grab. It's still 100% wool, but it's a superwash wool, I think, actually. So, that was my knitting self in the late 90s. That and this cable sweater that I made for my husband. And I think having made those, I ran out of steam a little bit because I didn't really knit anything properly until about the mid-noughties. I have learned that it's called the mid-noughties, the years between 2000 and 2010. Sounds really weird, the mid-noughties. But anyway, in the mid-noughties, that's when the online knitting community really started to arise and form, and you would find knitting resources on the internet everywhere. There were knit blogs, there were patterns, independent designers releasing their own patterns on their blogs, and then there was Ravelry, of course, which started in 2007. And I was Raveler number 22,000 something. Now I'm quite proud of that, because now there are millions of people on Ravelry, and I was Raveler 22,000 something. So I was there right at the beginning. And of course that opened just a whole new world, as I'm sure anyone who starts knitting today realizes that once you've gotten over the first few steps of just making that first mitten or sock or whatever, and you start actually looking outwards and finding all these online resources, I mean, it is just endless. And at that time, in the mid-noughties, I had a small child. and was working from home, but not full time. And I just started. I just delved into the knitting community, and I just dug up one pattern after the next, and I just learned so much through the knitting community. So there is definitely power in numbers when it comes to the knitting community, and what it can do to transform our lives and just teach us new things and make us develop as people and as crafters and as makers. Now, during those years, in the mid-noughties, if you go to my Ravelry page, you will find lots of my projects from that time in there. And I learned to knit lace. Lace was very popular at the time, and I actually brought one of my projects that I started back then, which then became a UFO and sat in my cupboard for 11 years before I actually finished it this last autumn. And this is the Shetland tea shawl. I forget the designer. I will put it up here. But it's a fine yarn. It's Ornagi Filati Merino Oro, I think. One of these really, really fine lace yarns, which has over 1,000 meters per 100 grams. And I finally finished it when I dug up my knitting, some of my UFOs last year. But I think it's really, really pretty. And if some of you saw me at Neulavasa last weekend, I was actually wearing this over my shoulders. Now these types of lace shawls, they're not that practical. They're not that wearable. But I love knitting them. I love knitting fine yarn on big needles and then just seeing the result when you block it and it opens up. It is so beautiful. And this was really popular in the mid and late noughties. This type of knitting. It's not so much anymore. But back then I did quite a few of these lace projects. I had the same problems with sweaters then that I have now, that I always get stuck somewhere. I always have to re-knit something, and they have a tendency to be left in my pile for procrastinating. But I might be on a better track now that I have this podcast that keeps me on my toes a little bit. So I knit a great deal in those years. But then after 2010, I started having such problems with my shoulders, neck, and arms, which partly arose from my knitting, but also from the fact that I was working by the computer all day, every day. And that combination was just too much static stress on the body. So at some point there, I actually took the decision to give up knitting for my health, actually, because I felt I have to work, you gotta work. And some would say you have to knit, and I would agree, basically, but I couldn't do both at that time. So I gave up knitting and just stopped completely for quite a few years. I never fell out of love with knitting. I still loved to look at yarns and to look at knitting, but I distanced myself from the knitting community, and just decided that I won't get into that because I need to take care of my health. And a lot of things happened in the other things happened in those years, and among those was that I trained to become a personal trainer and a physical therapist. Partly because I needed answers and I needed to solve the problems in my own body. And I didn't take up knitting until last year again. Wait, about a year ago, pretty much exactly 1 year ago, I took up knitting again. And I felt, because that I needed it. I needed it for my soul, and I needed it for my hands to do something. I was in a bit of a rough spot, and my hands needed to do something. And I haven't looked back since. I have completely submerged myself in knitting again, and I'm very happy to have done so. So, well, that was a bit of a ramble, actually, and I think it's definitely time to wrap this episode up. Thanks so much for joining me. I will see you out there on Instagram and in my next episode, whenever that may be. Until then, bye bye.